Brandon Adams. I'm going to be playing 5-10 Parliament Omaha six-handed. Playing at a table, it's pretty unfamiliar to me. I've seen LeggoPoker before. I think he's a regular. But other than that, I haven't played with any of these players. So, five-handed PLO game, should be playing pretty fast. I tend to prefer the shorter games, anywhere from 2 to 6 players, and tend not to like the nine-handed games, especially if I'm not familiar with the players. All right, we got dealt a nice starting hand. Have an ace high flush draw and 2 queens. I'm going to raise here. I wouldn't raise here if I didn't have the suited ace, but I like this spot. If I hit my hand and my opponents hit their hands, I should be in very good shape. Now I'm really looking to improve here to continue. I didn't improve. Pretty blank flop. I'm either well ahead or well behind in this spot. I'm going to fold. Kind of an unusual play by this guy to bet half the pot out of position. The way that he played that hand was representing a two-pair hand, king 4, king 6. Perhaps he had a king with several high cards and chose to play it aggressively on the turn. That hand had fairly uncoordinated hand, chose to just give it up before the flop. Obviously, this hand, one of the worst hands you could be dealt in Parliament Omaha trips. Yeah, I'm pretty selective raising out of the blinds. You only want to do it with hands that make the nuts, or more generally, hands that if you improve and your opponents also improve, you hit your hand harder and thus can win a big pot. So like on that particular hand, I had an ace high flush draw and I had a pair of queens. So if I raise before the flop and hit my set of queens, and someone who I'm playing with also hits a set, I hit the higher set and win a huge pot. Also, if I flop the flush, someone else flops a flush, I flop the highest flush. This is, not a tremendously strong hand, but certainly strong enough to raise in this spot. I'm going to sort of set my standard as raising the pot before the flop here. If the stack sizes were different, like if there were some short stacks behind me, I might choose to raise a smaller amount. This is not a great spot to have to call a raise in, but certainly I'm going to call in this spot against 3 players in position. Flopped a gut shot. Would love if it checked around to me and I could take a free card. I have blockers here such that no one can have the nuts. It wouldn't be a bad spot for me to bluff here, because it's unlikely that someone has 6-8. It's reasonable that I might have 6-8. However, to credibly bet this pot, I would have to bet the size of the pot, and someone could easily, I could be check raised with a wide variety of hands, a pair and flush draw, or some type of 2-3 with the ace high flush draw or something like this. So I'm not going to try to take a stab at it. Just hope to get lucky and hit the gut shot right here. Obviously, I don't hit the gut shot, but if it checks around here, now I'm going to be quite tempted to steal. No check. That was interesting the way this went down. He calls and leaves himself only 465. Interesting. Common situation in these games is that you have a short stack player like this guy who has 200. He's going to be less of a concern to your right than to your left. If he's to your left, then you have to worry about raising and then getting re-raised essentially all in. You do have to compensate for the short stack players. There are two basic compensations that you can make. You can play fewer hands, play a higher quality range of hands, or you can play the same range of hands but raise smaller such that if he re-raises you, you have the odds to call and to profitably call. I think that it's a huge advantage to short stack and PLO. I mean, we've seen in the bigger games that the short stack, some of the better short stack players have done quite well. It's a huge advantage to be able to not ever fold the best hand. To be able to get the money in early and then let the cards go as they might. So we have a good flop here. We flopped a pair and a flush draw and the nut flush draw. This is a good spot for me. Reasonably likely that someone else has a flush draw. If I call and hit the flush here, I'm going to bet right out and then plan to get one call on the turn by someone else who's made a flush, and then I'll also pot bet the river. All right, I miss, but not a bad card for me. I make two pair. Reasonably likely that someone had 9-10, so I'm just going to check my two pair with the nut flush draw. My hand, reasonably likely to be good here, but I cannot value bet it. Well, obviously the set of eights was scared by the straight that came on the turn and played very conservatively. I think he played it correctly, but he just played it conservatively. This is a hand that I'm going to raise. Very strong hand, double suited, good card values. 6 hurts the hand a lot because it's a dangler. Strong flop, top 2 nut flush draw. What are the stack sizes? It's an interesting spot. He is certainly representing. He knows that I've likely hit this board hard because I raised his limp before the flop. So he's representing 10-jack here. I am going to call. This is an interesting spot. Okay, I have, if he has 10-jack, then I have a lot of outs. If he doesn't have 10-jack, I almost certainly have the best hand. Pretty close spot. What I'm going to do, I'm going to call and fold if I miss on the river. He played that hand in an interesting way. He knew that I was likely to have high card values, so I was likely to hit that hand in some reasonably strong way. But if I hit the type of hands that I'm likely to hit on that flop, 2 pair or something along these lines, I'm probably going to check behind him on the flop when he checks. So his dominant option with Jack 10 there is actually to bet and you know, he knows that I'll call with a lot of weaker hands, and he's protecting his hand against the mini draws that I might have. On the turn, with top two and the nut flush draw, I'm making a marginally bad call if I know for sure that he's got 10 jack. When he bets the turn, I think it's very likely, certainly better than 50%, that he has 10 jack there. But there's some chance that he has, like, you know, bottom two or top and bottom and a flush draw, or, you know, there's some chance that I have the best hand with top two. So I can't strictly go by my odds of outdrawing the jack 10. So in that spot I called, and then I just gave up on the river. Here we have little two, cannot fold this hand. That card should scare him if he had a legitimate hand. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a strong hand here and the 10 scared him, but he did have a fairly strong hand. So these are like complete trash hands in Omaha. I won't even call 5 with this hand. Thus far this season, in terms of table dynamics, this table seems definitely solid. I mean, we saw this player with the set of 8s not put any bets on the turn or the river after the straight card came on the turn. We've seen this player play basically solid conservative poker. He does some questionable things, like in the hand where he represented the jack 10, to limp in the cutoff against when you have a full stack size and your opponents have full stack sizes is not a good play. If you're gonna come in, you should be coming in for a raise there. So we haven't really figured out his game so much, but my intuition is that he's probably a reasonably strong player. The variance of Parliament Omaha games is incredible. You'll find in a 5-10 no limit game, for instance, losing 5 buy-ins 1,000 at a time would be a very unlikely event, right? To lose $5,000 in, say, 2 hours of play would be a quite unlikely event. To lose 5,000 in 2 hours of play at 5-10 PLO would not be an unlikely event. You know, it's not. It's just a much higher variance game. There are a lot of situations where both players' optimal play is to get money in as quickly as possible, and so you just have like all-in situations occurring quite frequently, and the fact that hands play close before the flop means that you're getting more players in to see each flop. Okay, so this is an example of a very weak Omaha hand. You could think of an Omaha hand as composed of 6 Hold'em hands, and ideally you want those hands to be all working together. Optimal example of that would be like, you know, 8, 9, 10 jack or something like this. This is an example where we have six hands, none of which are working together very well, but we've actually flopped a gut shot to the straight flush and a small 6-high flush. We're gonna check, hope to get a bet here, figure to have the best hand. Now we're gonna bet. This is a bet for value. We look to get called by 2 pair and by a straight. Very unlikely that he has a higher flush. If he did call, certainly a flush a higher flush figures relatively strongly in his range of hands. And we would just check the river and then make an assessment from there. All right, so we have a very strong hand here. We have 2 aces with the ace-high flush draw and 2 cards that are at least working together to some extent. The 5-7 can make a straight. We're going to raise the pot here. It's important to note that in Hold'em, you're making a fairly big mistake by not playing aces fast. You know, typically, this is a hand, by the way, that I'm going to check, and then fold if he bets. Now I'm going to bet the pot. The reason I chose to play the hand that way is it's a hand that, given that I raised before the flop, he called me. It's a hand that's very likely to have hit him, and if it hits him with either a strong draw or a strong made hand, I'm going to bet out. He'll raise. And I think that he's sufficiently fearful of that board that he's not going to bluff too often after I check. So I think when I check and he bets, most of the time he has hit his hand in some way, either with a strong draw or with a strong made hand, a set or a 2-pair. And I don't want to play against him with aces out of position against those hands. So I just opted to check fold the flop. Now after he checks behind and the flop pairs the king, I know that I'm very likely to have the best hand, and I bet the hand not for value, but rather to protect against the mini draws that were out there. If I were raised there, I would give it up. There's some chance that I'm called by worse hands. All right, so that wraps up this session. Not too happy with the session, a little messy, lost a little bit of money. No really interesting tangles this time. We had one semi-interesting hand, one re-raise pot that ended uneventfully, and that was the session.